What happens when a legend refuses to fade, but time refuses to stop? On a charged night in the heavyweight division, Evander Holyfield walked toward the ring carrying not just his gloves, but the weight of nearly 20 years of war, glory, and unforgettable battles. Across from him stood the slick, confident, and calculating Toney, heavier than planned yet mentally razor-sharp, ready to prove that skill and timing could overcome reputation. The bout was scheduled for 12 rounds, but from the opening bell it was clear this was about more than rounds, it was about eras colliding. Toney shocked many by firing the first meaningful punch, immediately establishing that he would not be intimidated by Holyfield's legacy. Holyfield answered with crisp hooks and thudding body shots, briefly turning back the clock with a picture-perfect left that snapped Toney's head and reminded the crowd why he had once ruled boxing's biggest stages. In the early moments, the veteran looked sharp, determined, and dangerous. Yet as the rounds unfolded, Toney's defensive brilliance began to surface. Rolling his shoulders, slipping shots by inches and countering with tight combinations, he slowly shifted the rhythm of the fight in his favor. Holyfield pressed forward with courage, trying to impose his will on the inside, but at 41 years of age sustaining that intensity became increasingly difficult. Toney's subtle hand speed and precise timing made the difference. He backed Holyfield up, doubled his left hooks and threaded right hands through openings that appeared for split seconds. By the middle rounds, momentum had clearly changed. Toney was no longer reacting, he was dictating. Then came the defining moment, a sharp, perfectly timed shot that sent Holyfield to the canvas. It was more than a knockdown, it felt symbolic. The warrior rose, composed and proud, insisting he was balanced rather than hurt, but the energy inside the arena had shifted. Toney's confidence surged as he continued to unleash combinations, while Holyfield's legendary toughness could not fully mask the reality unfolding before everyone's eyes. As the final rounds ticked away, the fight carried an emotional weight. Fans sensed they might be witnessing the closing chapter of a remarkable career. Toney's disciplined combination punching and defensive mastery had neutralized Holyfield's aggression, turning what began as a nostalgic showcase into a statement performance. When the bout ended, it left admiration for Holyfield's bravery and respect for Toney's execution. Boxing, as always, delivered its harsh truth. Greatness lives forever in history, but inside the ropes, time remains undefeated. As the decision loomed and the final bell echoed through the arena, the atmosphere felt heavy with realization. Evander Holyfield, once the embodiment of relentless pressure and championship heart, stood quietly in his corner, breathing deeply, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. Across the ring, Toney exuded calm confidence, knowing he had executed his strategy with discipline and precision. The judges' scorecards would only confirm what had become increasingly clear over the later rounds. This night belonged to Toney. In the post-fight reflection, the narrative shifted from punch counts and combinations to legacy and longevity. Holyfield, ever dignified, refused to make excuses. He acknowledged the knockdown, insisting it was more about balance than damage, yet even in his composed words there lingered the undeniable truth that boxing had grown younger while he had grown older. Toney, on the other hand, spoke with quiet satisfaction. He had promised to beat Holyfield to the punch, to outthink him, to counter him, and he had done exactly that. Analysts debated whether this performance signaled the definitive end of Holyfield's era or simply a harsh lesson against a stylistic nightmare. His heart had not failed him. His courage had not diminished. But the sport demands more than bravery, it demands reflexes measured in milliseconds, stamina that does not fade in the sixth round, and timing that does not hesitate. Those tiny margins had favored Toney throughout the contest. For Toney, this victory represented validation. Critics had long questioned whether his style could dominate at heavyweight the way it had in lower divisions. On this night, he answered them emphatically. His defense, shoulder roll, and compact combinations dismantled a former champion with clinical efficiency. It was not just a win, it was a breakthrough. For Holyfield, the questions became unavoidable. Fighters often say they will know when it is time. Yet stepping away from the sport that defined you is never simple. The fire still burns, the belief still whispers, and the crowd's roar still calls. But boxing history is filled with champions who stayed one fight too long. As the arena lights dimmed and the crowd slowly dispersed, what remained was the image of two warriors at different crossroads. One had seized momentum and carved out a new chapter. The other faced reflection, legacy, and the difficult decisions that come only to legends. On this night, the sport reminded everyone watching that glory is fleeting, skill evolves, and time waits for no champion. In the days that followed, the conversation grew louder. Boxing writers, former champions, and fans around the world replayed the highlights again and again, analyzing every exchange between Evander Holyfield and James Toney. Some pointed to Holyfield's bravery, noting that even at 41 he continued pressing forward, refusing to surrender ground. Others focused on Toney's brilliance, the shoulder rolls, the subtle slips, the sharp counter right hands that consistently found their mark. The fight was no longer just about who won rounds, it had become a deeper discussion about timing, age, and evolution inside the ring. For Holyfield, the performance forced difficult but honest reflection. Throughout his career he had built a reputation on resilience, overcoming larger opponents and defying expectations. He had never been the naturally biggest heavyweight, yet his determination made him formidable. However, this night exposed something different. Not a lack of heart but a slight delay in reflex, a fraction of hesitation that at the highest level becomes costly. Against a technician like Toney, even the smallest lapse was magnified. Meanwhile, Toney embraced the spotlight. Critics who once questioned whether his defensive style could thrive consistently among heavyweights were now reassessing their views. His extra weight, once a concern, had proven beneficial in close exchanges, allowing him to absorb pressure while delivering compact, damaging combinations. More importantly, he demonstrated ring intelligence, controlling distance, setting traps, and capitalizing when Holyfield tried to surge forward. It was a calculated performance, not reckless aggression but controlled dominance. Promoters immediately began speculating about Toney's next move. A title opportunity suddenly felt realistic. His name re-entered serious championship conversations, and the division took notice. Heavyweights who had overlooked him were now forced to reconsider. Confidence radiated from Toney not through loud celebration, but through composed certainty. He knew he had made a statement. For Holyfield, the road ahead felt uncertain. Retirement discussions surfaced everywhere. Supporters urged caution, reminding him that legacy matters more than pride. Yet fighters of his caliber rarely step away easily. The ring had been his battlefield, his proving ground, his identity. Walking away meant closing a chapter that defined not just his career but his life. Ultimately, the fight became symbolic. It represented the constant cycle of boxing, one generation gradually giving way to the next. Legends rise, dominate, and inspire, but eventually face opponents who are faster, fresher, and strategically prepared. That reality does not erase greatness, it simply marks transition. As the dust settled, one truth remained undeniable: the bout was more than a contest of punches. It was a reminder that boxing is both brutal and beautiful, that it celebrates courage yet demands timing, and that even the greatest champions must one day confront the passage of time. On that night, James Toney stepped forward into a brighter spotlight, while Evander Holyfield stood at a crossroads, his legacy secure, his future uncertain, and the heavyweight division moved into its next chapter. As weeks turned into months, the impact of that fight continued to ripple through the heavyweight division. The performance of James Toney was no longer viewed as a simple victory over a respected veteran. It was now recognized as a strategic masterclass. Trainers dissected his foot positioning, his shoulder roll defense, and the way he subtly stepped to his left to neutralize Evander Holyfield's right hand. Young fighters studied the tape, learning how patience and timing could dismantle even the most experienced champion. Toney had not relied on raw power alone, he relied on ring IQ, composure, and efficiency. For Holyfield, the aftermath was quieter but deeply meaningful. Away from the cameras, he faced the internal battle that so many legends confront. Physically, he could still train, still spar, still feel the adrenaline. Mentally, the fire had not dimmed. But elite boxing is decided by margins so small they are almost invisible. A split-second delay, a half-step slower pivot, a punch that lands clean instead of grazing. Against Toney, those margins had made all the difference. The realization did not erase Holyfield's achievements. It simply framed them in perspective. The boxing community responded with a mix of respect and realism. Many praised Holyfield's courage for continuing to compete at a high level, acknowledging that very few fighters remain relevant into their 40s. At the same time, they recognized that Toney's dominance signaled a shift. The heavyweight division was evolving, becoming faster, more technical, less forgiving. Toney, energized by the win, carried himself differently. Interviews reflected confidence but also vindication. For years, he had insisted that his style could trouble anyone, regardless of size or reputation. Now he had proof. His ability to counter in tight spaces, to land short hooks and uppercuts while barely giving opponents a clean target, elevated him from contender to serious threat. Potential matchups were discussed with renewed excitement, and his name echoed louder in championship circles. Yet beyond rankings and titles, the fight remained a story about time and transition. Boxing history is filled with moments when eras overlap, when one warrior, still proud and capable, meets another stepping into his prime. Sometimes the torch is passed gently, sometimes it is taken forcefully. On this night it felt like the latter. Still, Holyfield's legacy stood untouched. Championships, unforgettable battles, and a reputation for bravery ensured that no single loss could redefine his career. Fans remembered not just this fight but the wars, the comebacks, the nights when he overcame the odds. Greatness in boxing is measured over years, not rounds. As the division moved forward, one truth became clear: the sport never pauses. New contenders rise, veterans reassess, and the cycle continues. James Toney's statement victory reshaped the conversation at heavyweight, while Evander Holyfield's journey became a reminder that even legends must eventually confront the limits of endurance. The ring remains the ultimate judge, unforgiving, honest, and timeless, and on that night, it delivered a verdict that signaled both an ending and a beginning.